8:17 in the morning. A quiet room. Pale light slipping through half-closed curtains. The kind of silence that feels heavier than usual. And then suddenly a phone begins to vibrate. Once, twice. Then again and again, as if refusing to stop. According to sources, that was the moment everything changed. The moment when it was said that Taiwo Hassan, after days, maybe weeks of battling what is believed to be terminal cancer, was no longer responding. A voice, trembling, almost unable to finish the sentence. He is gone, at 66. And just like that, the calm of the morning shattered into something cold, something irreversible. Quick flashes, hospital corridors washed in white, hurried footsteps echoing, a door pushed open too fast, and then a bed, empty. The oxygen tube still resting there, as if time itself had stepped out for a second and forgotten to return. Rewind just a little, because what happened before that moment is where the real weight begins to build. It is said that in the days leading up to this morning, Taiwo Hassan had been growing weaker. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly. The kind of decline that hides behind small details. A pause in conversation, a breath that comes a second too late, a glance that lingers a bit longer than usual. According to those close to him, the diagnosis of late-stage cancer had already cast a shadow over everything. But there was still hope, or at least something that looked like hope. Treatments, quiet prayers, whispered reassurances that maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. But the body tells its own story. And sometimes, it tells it too quietly for anyone to hear in time. Inside the hospital room, machines hummed softly, steady, indifferent. And beside the bed, Peju Ogunmola, his wife, remained there. Not as a spectator, but as someone holding on to every second as if it could slip away without warning. According to reports, she had barely slept, barely left his side. Watching, waiting, listening to every small change in his breathing. And then there were moments, the kind that no one prepares for. Moments when pain becomes visible, when the person you know begins to look like someone else, thinner, quieter, distant in a way that words cannot quite explain. It is said that she tried to stay strong, tried to believe that he could still hear her, that somewhere behind the silence, he was still there. But the tension in the room kept building, nurses moving in and out, voices lowered but urgent, a look exchanged between doctors that seemed to say more than any explanation ever could. And then, the moment came closer, not with a loud announcement, not with a dramatic shift, but with a subtle change. A pause. A stillness that felt wrong. According to sources, it was Peju who noticed first, the way his chest no longer rose the same way, the way the machines, once steady, began to sound different. And then, the realization, sudden, crushing, undeniable. She broke down, not quietly, not in a controlled way, but completely. A kind of grief that does not ask for permission. Tears falling without restraint, her voice calling his name as if it could pull him back, as if saying it one more time might undo what was happening. Around her, the room blurred into motion, doctors stepping forward, hands moving quickly, but somehow everything also felt frozen, as if time had split into two directions, one rushing forward, the other refusing to move at all. Outside the room, the world continued. People walking past, unaware, conversations happening, ordinary life unfolding just meters away from something so final, and inside, there was only loss, only the echo of what had just disappeared. As the minutes passed, the intensity began to settle into something heavier, quieter. Peju still there, still holding on, even as the reality became impossible to ignore. According to those who later spoke, there was a moment when everything went silent. Not just the machines, but the entire space, as if the room itself had acknowledged what had happened. And then, the slow, painful shift into aftermath. The calls that had to be made, the words that had to be said, each one carrying the weight of finality. Outside, the light had grown stronger, morning fully awake now. But inside that room, it felt like time had stopped somewhere between a breath and the absence of one. And in the corner, near the bed, the oxygen tube still lay there, untouched, as if waiting, as if it didn't yet understand that it was no longer needed. 2:30, and the story pulls back, rewinding quietly to a few months earlier. A different time, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. Taiwo Hassan was still there, still appearing in public, still smiling for cameras, still delivering his lines with the same familiar presence that audiences had known for years. But according to many who were close enough to notice, something had already begun to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in small, almost invisible ways. His eyes. They say his eyes no longer carried the same energy. There was a pause behind them, a weight that didn't belong to the moment. On set, everything looked normal. Lights, cameras, movement. Yet there were interruptions. Subtle at first. Moments when he would step away earlier than expected. Moments when he would sit down longer than usual between takes, brushing it off with a quiet smile. Just a little tired, he reportedly said more than once, and no one pushed further, because sometimes people choose to believe what is easiest to accept. But the pattern continued. The fatigue didn't pass. It stayed, lingering in ways that became harder to ignore. According to sources, he had already begun experiencing persistent pain, not sharp enough to alarm immediately, but constant enough to wear him down. A kind of discomfort that follows you through the day and into the night. And yet, he chose silence, chose to carry it quietly, perhaps hoping it would fade, perhaps not wanting to turn it into something real by saying it out loud. Colleagues would later recall small details, fragments that only made sense in hindsight. One remembered a moment when he paused mid-conversation, as if searching for breath. Another spoke about how he leaned against a wall longer than usual after a scene, smiling, nodding, insisting everything was fine. And then there were the objects, the kind that remain when people move too quickly. A glass of water left half untouched on a table, a script folded and set aside, not finished. A chair slightly pushed back as if someone had intended to return, but didn't. These details, insignificant at the time, now felt like signals. Quiet warnings that no one fully understood. As the days passed, whispers began to form. Not openly, not confirmed. Just fragments of concern moving between conversations. He doesn't look well. Have you noticed he's been leaving early? And then, the word no one wanted to say out loud. Cancer. At first it was just a rumor, something uncertain, something distant. But according to reports, there were already signs pointing in that direction. Medical visits kept private, schedules quietly adjusted, appearances reduced without explanation. The tension began to rise, slowly but steadily, like a storm building somewhere just out of sight. And still, He continued, showing up, performing, smiling, as if holding everything together by sheer will, until the weight of it all began to show more clearly, and the question that lingered behind every glance, every unfinished sentence, every quiet exit, started to grow louder. What exactly was happening to him? And how long had it been unfolding without anyone truly seeing it? 7 o'clock. And then, the truth begins to surface. Not publicly, not loudly, but behind closed doors. According to sources, the diagnosis was believed to be late-stage cancer, a sentence that changes everything the moment it is spoken, yet it was never announced widely, never confirmed in front of cameras or microphones. Instead, it stayed within a small circle, family, a few trusted people, and an unspoken agreement to keep it that way. Outside, the world continued as usual, unaware, still seeing fragments of the man they had always known, but inside, everything had already shifted. The hospital room became the center of a quiet battle. White lights overhead, too bright, too cold. Machines arranged carefully around the bed, each one producing a steady rhythm, a constant reminder that something fragile was being measured second by second. Time didn't feel normal there. It stretched, slowed, sometimes almost stopped. According to those who were there, the atmosphere was heavy, not filled with panic, but with something deeper. A silence that carried fear, hope, denial, all at once. And in that silence, Peju Ogunmola remained, closer than anyone else. It is said that she rarely left his side, sitting beside the bed for hours that blurred into nights, her hand holding his, not tightly, not desperately, but firmly, as if that connection alone could anchor him. She didn't speak much, because sometimes words feel too small, too powerless in the face of something this final. Instead, she watched. Every breath, every slight movement, every change that might mean something, or nothing at all. The nights were the hardest, long, quiet, broken only by the soft beeping of machines, a sound that became both comfort and torment. Because as long as it continued, there was still something to hold on to. But every slight variation, every irregular pause, carried a question. Is this the moment everything changes? According to reports, there were times when the room felt suspended between two realities, one where recovery was still possible, and another where the end was already approaching. Doctors moved carefully, speaking in low voices, choosing their words with precision, not because they didn't know, but because saying it out loud would make it undeniable. And still, the truth kept pressing closer, visible in his weakening body, in the way his strength faded day by day, in the silence that replaced conversation. Family members would come and go, their presence quiet, respectful, as if stepping into something sacred and fragile. No one wanted to disturb the stillness, because that stillness had become the only space where hope could exist, even if it was fading. And through it all, Peju remained there, sometimes leaning forward, sometimes resting her head near his arm, her eyes fixed on him as if trying to memorize every detail, every line, every breath. There were moments when it seemed like time might reverse, when his chest rose just a little stronger, when his fingers moved slightly, enough to spark a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, the story could change. But then the machines would remind them, steady, unchanging, indifferent to emotion, and the rhythm of the room would return to its slow, heavy pace, the truth. no longer just a rumor, no longer something distant, was now fully present, filling every corner of that space, and with each passing hour, each passing night, it became harder to ignore that this was not just a battle, but a countdown, unfolding quietly, relentlessly, in a room where every second felt heavier than the last. 12 o'clock. And suddenly, everything begins to move faster. The fragile balance that had been holding on for days starts to break. According to sources, his condition was believed to be worsening rapidly, not gradually this time, but in a way that felt urgent, irreversible. The rhythm of the room changed. The machines no longer sounded calm. Footsteps in the hallway grew quicker, sharper, voices no longer just whispers, quick cuts, doctors walking fast, exchanging looks that carried unspoken meaning. A door closing firmly behind them, sealing the space inside into something more intense, more final. And then, that sentence, the one no one is ever ready to hear. He doesn't have much time. It didn't echo loudly, but it lingered, heavy, impossible to escape, according to multiple reports. That was the moment Peju Ogunmola began to break. Not slowly, not quietly, but all at once, as if everything she had been holding back finally collapsed. Her composure gone, replaced by something raw, uncontrollable. She cried, not just with tears, but with her whole body, her voice trembling as she tried to speak, to call his name, to reach him in a way that no longer seemed possible. Inside the room, every detail became sharper, more painful. His hand, once steady, now trembling slightly, fingers weak, barely able to respond, his eyes heavy, struggling to stay open, as if each second demanded more strength than he had left, and his breathing, slower now, uneven. Each breath sounding like a quiet fight, like something being pulled away piece by piece. Family members stood nearby, some frozen, some turning away because they could not bear to watch, their faces carrying the same expression. Helplessness. The kind that comes when there is nothing left to fix, nothing left to change. According to those present, there were moments when someone tried to speak, to offer comfort, but the words fell short, disappearing into the weight of the room, because no sentence could hold what was happening. No reassurance could undo it. The tension kept rising, every second stretching longer than it should. The machines, once steady, now fluctuating, their sounds no longer predictable, creating a rhythm that made everyone hold their breath without realizing it. Peju moved closer, closer than before. Her hand, gripping his, tighter now, as if refusing to let go. Her tears falling onto his skin, her voice breaking as she whispered words that only he was meant to hear. Words filled with love, with fear, with a desperate hope that maybe somewhere he could still understand, still feel. But time did not slow down for her, did not wait. It continued moving forward, pushing everything toward a moment no one wanted to face, his chest rising, then pausing, rising again, but weaker, slower. Each breath more fragile than the last. And in those seconds, everything else disappeared. The hospital, the world outside, even the sound of the hallway, all fading into the background, leaving only that space, that bed, that final connection between two people, one holding on, the other slowly slipping away, and the feeling unbearable, that this was the point where hope no longer had anywhere left to go. 1700, and we return to that moment. 8:17 in the morning, the same room, the same pale light slipping through the curtains. But now everything feels different. unnaturally still, as if the air itself has stopped moving. According to sources, the machines that had been steady for so long began to slow, not all at once, but gradually, their rhythm stretching, weakening, until the sound that once filled the room became uncertain, fragile, almost hesitant. No voices, no clear final words, no dramatic farewell, just a silence that grew heavier with every passing second. Peju Ogunmola remained there, close, closer than ever, her head slowly lowering, her shoulders trembling, tears falling quietly, not the loud cries from before, but something deeper, something exhausted, as if the weight of everything had finally settled, and there was no strength left to fight it. In that moment, time seemed to lose its meaning. Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt like something endless, his chest rising, then pausing, and then not rising the same way again. A stillness that no one wanted to acknowledge, but everyone could feel around them. No one moved immediately, as if breaking the silence would make it real, as if staying frozen could somehow delay the truth. According to those who were there, it was not a single moment, not a clear line between before and after, but a gradual fading, like a light dimming so slowly that you only realize it is gone when the room is already dark. Peju's hand was still holding his, even as the warmth began to change, even as the connection she was clinging to became something fragile, distant. Her tears continued to fall, landing softly, disappearing into the stillness. And yet she did not pull away. Not yet. Because letting go would mean accepting what had just happened. And that was something her heart was not ready to do. Near the bed, the small details remained. The chair beside him, still slightly warm, as if it remembered the hours she had spent there, leaning forward, refusing to rest, a crumpled tissue in her hand, twisted tightly, a silent record of every tear that had come before. The machines, now quiet, no longer marking time, no longer holding anything in place, and beyond the room, the world had already begun to move again. Footsteps returning to the hallway, distant voices, life continuing without pause. But inside that space, everything felt suspended, as if the moment had not fully ended, as if something unseen was still lingering, in the air, in the silence, in the space between one breath and the absence of the next. And somewhere in that quiet, with her head still lowered, her hand still holding on, there was a feeling, faint but impossible to ignore, that even though the room was now still, something had just left it, leaving behind only echoes and a silence that felt far too heavy to ever fully disappear. 21:30. The pace slows, the noise fades, and the story drifts into something quieter, heavier. A late afternoon settles in. The sunlight no longer sharp, no longer bright. Just a pale glow slipping gently across the room, touching the same walls, the same objects that have not been moved, not a single thing. According to those who have seen it, the space remains exactly as it was, as if time paused the moment everything changed. The bed still there, sheets slightly creased, untouched, holding the shape of something that is no longer present. The air, still, almost too still, as if even the smallest sound would feel out of place. On a nearby table, a photograph of Taiwo Hassan rests, slightly tilted, not perfectly aligned, as though someone had placed it down in a moment of hesitation or grief, and never returned to adjust it. The frame catching the soft light, reflecting just enough to make it feel alive, and yet unmoving. Outside, according to multiple sources, conversations continue, voices filled with disbelief, with sorrow, people recalling moments, scenes, memories that now feel different, heavier, because they are being remembered from a distance that cannot be closed. The world speaks, shares, reacts, but inside this room, none of that sound seems to enter. Here, there is only silence, not empty, but full, dense with everything that has happened, and everything that cannot be undone. Near the corner, a piece of clothing still hangs, untouched, waiting in a way that feels almost impossible to explain, as if it does not yet understand that it will not be worn again. The fabric still unmoving, holding its place in a world that has already shifted. The chair beside the bed, slightly turned, the same position it was left in, carrying the memory of someone who sat there for hours, refusing to leave. The faint imprint of presence still lingering, in a way that cannot be seen, but somehow felt. The light continues to fade, slowly, gently, stretching shadows across the floor, turning the room into something softer, but also more distant, more unreal. And in that quiet, there is a strange sensation, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, as if the space itself is holding on to something, a trace, a fragment of what once filled it, a voice that is no longer heard, a breath that no longer moves the air, and yet not entirely gone, because in moments like this, endings do not feel complete. They feel unfinished, suspended, like a sentence left without its final word. And somewhere, in the stillness, between the fading light and the deepening shadows, there is a lingering thought, one that refuses to settle, that maybe, just maybe, this story has not fully let go yet.